The title of this is Developing Adaptive and Vibrant Workplaces Through Mindfulness Practice. And one of the things I'd like to do is start with this beautiful print work by Japanese artist named Hokusai. This is called The Great Wave. And the reason I like this so much is that it reminds me of our times, right? This is like every morning I wake up, this is what I see, right? Unfolding. I have 3 children. Anybody have kids out there? Or even a significant other, a cat, it doesn't matter. If you're alive in 2022, this is what life can feel like. And it's hitting you from every angle. And unlike other organizational change, which in the old days, it used to be periodic, they would call it punctuated equilibrium. Like you'd have these moments of like calm, and then something would happen and you'd deal with it. And then you'd have more moments of calm followed by that. But now what we're dealing with is whitewater. We are in the age of whitewater, and living and surviving and thriving and being fully human in an age of whitewater really requires a whole different set of competencies, and competencies that we have not really added to the radar as much as we should, even though over 60% of corporations actually now incorporate mindfulness practice in their training and development. But this is all like new terrain, so people don't know exactly quite what they're doing. They might listen to John Kabat-Zinn recording and think they know enough about it, but it's actually fascinating how the development of what I call conscious agility impacts organizational structure, culture, leadership, learning, right? All of those things. I'm going to walk you through that. So first, what I want to do is kind of orient us to what mindfulness practice is. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this picture because I just love this picture. At the bottom, well, let's just say that this picture as a whole is like the mind. Okay. And there are different aspects of the mind. But most of the time, we're down there in the city, right? In that busy, bustling city. And in that city of our mind, there's a lot of movement. There's traffic. There's construction areas. There are, dead ends. There are all kinds of interesting things going on and plenty to distract us. And the older we get, the further we get from the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. Our minds become full with three big things, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. And I call them the big A's. And those are your anxieties, your assumptions, and your attachments. And those are constantly operating. So no matter what you're doing, if you're a human being, they are operating. And mindfulness is not about getting rid of them. And when I asked how you associate with that word, I was really happy to hear you not say getting rid of your thoughts, because that's virtually impossible. we would we would not be human if we just got rid of our thoughts. We would be artificial intelligence. Okay, so that busy, bustling city of a place is where when we wake up, I don't know, just think about this morning. You woke up, your day started, you probably had things pop into your head, probably some concerns, some worries, and you're juggling, right? You're constantly juggling. Well, this has really just a great big impact on our performance at work, which is the old key performance indicator, is like bottom line productivity, performance type stuff, which is important because we want our organizations to thrive. But that's not exclusive of well-being and having fun, and even if not having fun, just feeling that work is meaningful and walking away feeling full in this one short life that you have. So thankfully, there's another part of the mind that is greater in awareness, a more open, spacious awareness, and that is the mountain. And at any moment, there's one thing you can do to go up to that mountain and see your thoughts, but not be your thoughts. Okay. Because when you're down there, it's very easy to identify with your thoughts and be your thoughts. But to come up to the top of the mountain and to get that distance, that breathing room, that space to lead and learn and thrive, it takes one conscious deep breath, one really good. It doesn't take a whole lot of meditation and all that. It takes one real good deep breath, right? And getting that space. Now, there's a whole neuroscience to this. And if you've studied the work of John Kabat-Zinn, who's basically the person who inspired my research in organizational learning and leadership, et cetera, um, there is a way of doing this. And there is a real neuroscience behind this. And frankly, that's why I got involved in this stuff. The origin of this becoming a research agenda and consulting technique for me was because while I was doing your typical consulting and training and all of that combined stuff, um, I really wasn't thinking about this. I was just kind of caught in the conveyor belt of life, trying to make money, trying to succeed, climb the ladder, right? Do all the things that the hidden curriculum of life tells you are important. We just sort of adopt those and run with them. But what happened though out of the blue was my sister passed away completely out of the blue. And I struggled. I didn't know what to do. I noticed that my mind would not stop running. It ran all the time and it was exhausting. And I would worry and I would have these anxieties. What if I die? What if there's like maybe it's hereditary? There's like all of this, real stuff, like real life, real suffering. And what do when you don't know the answer? You go to Google. That's what I did. I went to Google and I typed in, what do you do if you can't stop thinking about something? You're like always worried. What do you do? Because other things, the traditional things that are in my life, they weren't really working for me so well. And up pops a lecture video of John Kabat-Zinn talking to the employees of Google about the virtues of mindfulness practice. And I said, I've got to learn from this guy. And the reason he like had me at hello is because he wasn't just doing this incense beads kind of mindfulness. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it was empirically grounded in research, in real like close research that has been published in really great peer-reviewed journals. So I said, this guy, he has to know what he's talking about. So I sought his experience and I trained with him in New York State. He doesn't do it anymore, but he used to facilitate these long, intensive retreats for people who would learn to facilitate mindfulness practice. And while I was there, of course, I couldn't stop thinking. It only made me think more. And the practice became more inherently difficult for me because I thought I had stumbled upon something so amazing. I wanted everybody to know about it, right? So what I want you to take away from this slide in particular is this. We're human. We have thoughts. Our thoughts get us into trouble all the time. And some might say, if you look at the Eastern philosophy, that the more we think, the more we get in our own way. And like John Kabat-Zinn says, sometimes you have to give yourself a restraining order, right? And that's what this is all about. That busy place down in that busy, bustling place, that's where ego lives and thrives. That is the city that ego built. When I say ego, what do I mean when I say ego? I'll just throw out a question to the two or three of you out there. When I say ego, maybe somebody comes to mind that you work with. I don't know. But when I say it, what does it bring to you?
I'll jump in. I'll say that it's somebody who has to center himself
Excellent.
in what's going on.
Mhm.
I think as
Right.
someone that's self-centered.
Mhm. Very good. It's interesting because the literature talks about it very much the way that you're saying it. I like the way that you're saying it better than the way the literature says it, because I like the visual of somebody putting themselves into center of things, sort of like with a spotlight shining down on them. So this is kind of like this deep desire to be special, to stand out above others, which inherently means what? Difference making. I'm separating myself from you because I am better than you in some way. And we work and live in a system that rewards that kind of behavior. As a professor, my little professor hat, I get rewarded for having my name as the first author in articles. Now, if that weren't such a big deal, I'd just make all my students the first authors in articles. But as a non-tenured professor, that's something that you've got to do. We get invited to give presentations like this, right? And here we are, it's like I'm tap dancing on a stage, sort of, right? It feels good. It feels good. It's a validation of me being special. The problem is it gets us into trouble more often than not. And here's the cool thing that I think this is cool. In that busy city, that thinking city, that is the space that gives rise to ego. Thinking and ego actually activate the same part of the brain. So if you're speaking, it triggers a part of the brain that is responsible for what's called self-referential processing. So if you're talking, there's a heck of a lot of what's in it for me going on. And it feeds that motivation. And there's tons of research. I can give you all the research later. You just have to trust me for now. One way to do this before I move on from this slide is that when you're in that busy city, let's say that you are experiencing sadness. Okay. When you're in that city, the language we use is I am sad. And that is very common language, right? That's not uncommon. However, when you rise above it and you create that space, you can say, I have sadness. Or even better, I am sadnessing. Or maybe this is like too far off, but I have sadnessing. That's really what it is, right? And that ability to create that space is an agility. And what I'm going to show you is how that agility can be developed, and there are multiple benefits to that agility. So it's probably going to spark some things in your mind, but let's walk you through it. All right. So mindfulness practice is really about observing and letting go. And what are you observing and letting go of? Anxieties. We all have them, right? And the older you get, the harder it is to shake these things, right? There's all kinds of anxieties. And they're generally described as worries, nervousness, and physical. There's a physicality to it. It's like the lump in your throat, your tummy, and that when you're given a presentation or you're involved in a conflict or you're delivering bad news or any of these everyday human interactions, anxieties are like gasoline to the flames, right? We're all kind of balancing this gas, we're carrying it with us. Most of it's not really being mindful that we have it, right? But we identify it with it. I am anxious versus I have anxiety. So one of the things that's nice is that mindfulness practice can diffuse anxiety. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Second thing that we carry with us are assumptions. Now, this is really important when it comes to strategy and behavior and motivating others and things like I was just talking to Angela about onboarding, right? And she's doing this really great research on onboarding using a enhanced critical incident technique. And when you come in as a new employee into an organization, you're carrying assumptions. And what ends up happening is the minute you walk in the door, from the things that you see, forget, you might not even talk to anybody yet, they will rub against your assumptions in some type of a way, right? Because you assume maybe that, I don't know, an office layout should look a certain way, or somebody should greet or introduce me a certain way, right? And so we carry these and these sort of operate over here because in the meantime, we're trying to be clever. It's always good to be clever, but all of your assumptions are operating over here. So what mindfulness does is it produces this thing called metacognition, where You can see this, why you're doing this. That is a competency that most people don't have. It's very, or they have it maybe fleeting moments, but it's very hard to develop. And that's what I'm interested in. So if we have a strategy, we're working on a strategy and we keep bumping our heads against the wall, the ability to see the assumptions that are in the room and to speak to them tactfully without over identifying or personalizing things, that is a real leadership competency. So that's something else we can be mindful of. And finally, attachments. Attachments are those sticky things that we just can't seem to shake. We might even be aware that we have attachments and they're still hard to shake. Bad habits, for instance. Um, Attachments, now this is getting a little Eastern philosophical here, but attachments are a profound source of suffering. And if you think back to the whitewater, that first slide that I showed you, it is really, I mean, think about it. We live in a world where it's hard to get attached to anything anymore. We're constantly being dealt with. And it's nice to be attached to things, right? Like it feels good. Love is an attachment. We want to feel a sense of attachment to our organization, right? We want to feel engaged and good about it. But we don't want to do it so much that that becomes who we are, so that when the change does happen, change readiness isn't there. So there's a big correlation between this work and change readiness preparation and resilience. And I'll tell you about a bunch of studies that I'm working on. I talk about these big three: attachments, anxieties, and assumptions, and the way that they act as a sort of minefield in chapter 1 of this book that's coming out on May 4th. And I talk about, if you're going to develop and lead a diversity, equity, and inclusion department, which a lot of people are getting handed, they don't know what to do. Quite frankly, it's anxiety provoking, because especially, I mean, it doesn't even matter what your race or gender is, it's anxiety provoking for everyone, because nobody wants to hurt feelings. Nobody wants to be accused, right? It's like, it's a little different than learning Microsoft Word, right? Learning diversity, equity, and inclusion is a little different. And so this chapter talks about that. And I really think that's the real work of developing diversity, equity, and inclusion competencies. So let's talk about this real quick. Let's get neuroscientific for a second. This is how I like to think about it. This is your mind, okay? And we're traveling a path, right? We're traveling a path, and oops, sorry. That part that's outside, the lush green where all these things are happening, like that you feel the sun on your face, the smell of the flowers, all that the sounds of the birds, all that beautiful stuff. We kind of push it out. We kind of push that out because we've got work to do during the day, right? We push it all out and we center our consciousness rigidly on our work. The stuff that we're pushing out is a form of consciousness that is studied through, all kinds of different neuroscientific methods. It's called phenomenal consciousnness. And this is the place that we feel, we sense, we intuit. So if we're watching a movie, we let go, right? And suddenly the TV isn't there. We're like in the movie, right? We're in it and we're feeling and we're emoting. Hallmark Channel, right? Like this is important. And it's also an important part of being human. It's also an important part of being human and engaged at work. But here's what we do. We spend most of our time in a different form of consciousness that's responsible for thinking and reflection and language. And we try to stay the path, right? And the reason that I'm bringing this up, and you'll see in a second, is that this paradigm of walking the path of thinking and reflecting and problem solving and tackling challenges and all those, that think is going to be our demise. I really believe this, especially with the dawn of artificial intelligence. Now, it's going to be really hard, but talent development folks are already seeing this. So if you're in the space of talent development, you're already seeing a shift to privileging the development of innovation, right? Competencies like design thinking and creativity and innovation and inclusion, right? That really require and are hardwired neurologically to phenomenal consciousness. What makes it so hard, though, is that we are conditioned evolutionarily to access consciousness. It's how we survive, right? We have to make judgments or we get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, right? And the harsher the reality is at work, the more judgmental we get. Have you ever gotten caught in one of those judgment circles with somebody else where they're being judgy and then you get a little judgy and then they get even more judgy? Have you ever experienced that? That's not helpful for anything, especially organizational performance. And there are entire cultures of organizations that are just judgy. And it's probably the most human thing that you can imagine, because it's how we've evolved. It's also ingrained. We are in a society that's a capitalist society, and you work hard and you put your work in, and at the end of the day you feel good. I worked hard and here's my to-do list and I did all these things, and meanwhile your life is slipping by, right? All of the beauty that is here and we can enjoy, including each other. And that's also really important. That gets lost on a lot of people. We're rewarded for individual performance. It's very rare that teams are rewarded for performance. Even if it's set up that way, it doesn't really work that way, because under the line, what people see is they're looking for high pose. They want high potentials, right? That's the language of talent development. Who are the high pose, right? And it's expected. You get in a meeting, you are not going to be talking about feeling the sunshine on your face. You're going to be you're going to have a flip chart, you're going to have a PowerPoint, you're going to be talking, you're going to be sounding clever, you can be challenging assumptions, and there's a time and a place for that. The other thing is it's intimately tied with our sense of self. To think is to be, right? Descartes. That is our being is imprinting a sense of the way we see the world on the world, and it comes naturally. So the problem with all of this is that, let me go to the classic skill, will, power. Does this look familiar, by the way, before I get into talking about this? Skill versus will, the 9 box of talent development. I don't want to assume that y'all know this. Seeing knows. Okay, so you walk into an HR, some kind of an office, and you might see this on the wall, something like this, right? This is the basic paradigm that HR and talent development have used forever. And it is that if you have the right skills, we want to hang on to you and we want to develop those skills. So we want that line on the left side. We want to think about what skills do you need for your job right now and in the future. And we want to elevate those skills, and we want to put the money into the places where those skills will serve you well in the future. Okay, that's the skill. The will is be a nice person, have a good attitude, have some drive, get in there and work, and forgive people and smile every once in a while. Don't be such a stone face, so if you get those two things going at the same time, the old paradigm, which is still a paradigm, and it just shows up under different names, is to push people into that top right hand corner. Now here's the really crazy thing. Skill and will are nothing other than representations of thinking and ego. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So what is happening here, and this is what I'm proposing here, is that we're inadvertently rewarding ego at the same time as AI is coming on board. So conscious agility says, okay, you could develop your skill and your will, and that's great. But at the same time, what we need to do is develop conscious awareness, and really that being present in the moment piece. is really important. So that's what this kind of looks like, to put it in the context of talent development, if this makes sense. So this is sort of what we talked about so far. You've got your range of awareness, everyday awareness, right? There's thinking, verbalizing, judging. We spend most of our days there. But the what it is like quality of this experience right now, as you're listening to me and you're having your thoughts and you're in your homes or offices or wherever you are, right? It's sort of like you come home, if you're at work for a long day, and you take your shoes off. The experience of taking your shoes off and decompressing is a very different feeling than being at your work at the drawing board and working really hard. They're very different conscious experiences of being, and that is important to think about. And here's why. There are two types of organizations you can work in, and spaces as individuals that you can be. Okay. There's the consciously agile organization, and that's defined as the degree to which individuals in an organization can shift their attention away from that thinking space, that I, me, mine, get it done, do, worker bee space, and sustain attention in that phenomenal consciousness space to get two things. One is to receive creative insights and develop a real felt sense of being cohesive with other people. Conscious rigidity, on the other hand, is the opposite. It's a myopic, it's fixated, it's you're kind of walking through life bumping into walls trying to get things done, and it relies and is actually its center of gravity is ego needs. And you know people like this, and there's a little bit of you who's like this. I know I wake up and I go, oh, there's ego, there are my ego needs, right? So becoming aware of this in a world where AI is replacing access consciousness, because think about it. What is AI? AI is the ability to compute automatically, to find information, compute it, create predictive statistics, plan scenarios, and do all of this 24 hours a day without being political or personal or having, conflict or any of those things that human beings have. It does it better than you can imagine. It does it faster than you can imagine, better than any human being. So what's the value proposition of human beings in this new world? What type of human being are we trying to attract, develop, and retain? We want the type of person who can do two big things that AI can't. AI cannot be creative. And when I say creative, I mean real creativity. So I want to stop for a second and ask you all, where do, when you get your best ideas, where are you? What are you usually doing when you get your best ideas?
Walking or driving.
Hmm. You mean you're not at the desk working hard with the pencil in your ear? And
Right.
how about others? Carla, what about you? What do you usually?
So definitely when I'm walking, I like to go out. I have a nature path. I like to
Oh,
take breaks and go walk the path. It's like 2 miles and it's awesome. Um, and also, of course, when I meditate, like new things come up. Like you can be focusing on your breath and then all of a sudden you'll solve a problem that you've been thinking about for days and it just will like come to you.
okay, you got this. Why do you need this presentation? You all know what you're talking about. I mean, that's really what it is, right? Because honestly, okay, the type of meditation that I'm interested in this mindfulness practice, there's nothing religious about it,
Mhm.
right? Carla, you know this. Secular mindfulness practice is actually based off of a form of meditation that's 2,600 years old called Vipassana. And that is, when you translate that, it means insight meditation. So the trick is, by not getting caught up in thought and just being, you receive insight. You don't have to think your way into inclusion or creative ideas. In fact, that's the worst way to do it. If you want to have a real game-changing, innovative idea, go take a walk. There's so many stories about this. But there are other things you can do in the adult development world to shift people's attention into phenomenal consciousness and expand that attention so that they receive insights. And some of the most important insights we can receive are insights about how we relate with others and how we create walls. And what is that all for? Why am I so preoccupied with being special? Why do I, what is that really? And getting a sense of the long view of things, right? The really long view of things, like the view of things that preceded you and come after you, right? We're only here for a blip of time. So that is very, very important. And according to a ton of research, okay, it's hard to cram this all into a presentation. The more you expand into phenomenal consciousness, going for walks, walking on the beach, climbing a mountain, or just simply enjoying an ice cream cone, the more you do that, the better you develop these skills and abilities that are going to be required. They're required right now, frankly, but these are the things that are going to benefit organizations in immense ways. In fact, let me just show you the brain science on this. This is really cool stuff. So when you're doing phenomenal consciousness, right? When let's say you're kissing a loved one, like an intimate kiss, one that kind of gives you tingles, right? Or you're watching a movie and you get you get the goosebumps, right? And watching a movie, or you see a sunset, or you something, you look at your child in a way that just is so beautiful. It activates the prefrontal cortex. And this part of your brain is associated with the same, they actually did a study on this, that when people have epiphanies, they have great ideas. This is the part of the brain that activates. The article on this talks about the aha moment and where that lives neurobiologically, and it's in that prefrontal cortex. And in organizations, I call these green dragon organizations. I get a little Eastern with this, but green dragon organizations are organizations where employees can do this, and they can rise above ego, and they can let go of their thinking and their expert and their habits of mind and all these things. And the world becomes a little bit of a better place to work in, right? So the two key things that this part of the brain activates are important to organizations, both through the lens of inclusion and innovation. And I won't read these things, but you can imagine that, there's an awful lot that this would help, especially when AI is replacing accountants and operations and all of these really traditional proud jobs. Take a look there. Now on the flip side, you've got the, oh, did I not show you? Oh, I did. I left the slide out. My bad. Red dragon organizations are ones where you have red dragons that are chasing each other inside of access consciousness. It's a quick cycle of ego and expertise. Think about, tomorrow, if you're in a meeting tomorrow, just look at the meeting and just like remember this presentation and sit back, look like you're listening at least, and observe the ego in the room. Observe how expertise shows up. And I'm talking about stubborn expertise. The opposite of that is what you see right here. Now, I did a ton of research. Is this, these lit reviews on other lit reviews and scientific literature. I wanted to know if you're going to develop an organizational culture that's going to bring in some profit, it's going to make people happy, it's going to make them want to stay, and it's going to give them some longevity and sustainability. What type of culture do you want? And 4 big things came up over and over and over again. These are the big 4. Okay, I'll boil it down for you. Welcome change. These are people who welcome the white water. Bring it on. And actually enjoy it, and are adaptive. You cannot adapt when you're clinging, right? That's where access consciousness is. These are people who are capable of letting go. Organizations they're not attached. The other thing is organizations where the cultures are selfless, which is the antithesis of ego, right? And virtuous. There's not this, I'm going to do this because it's going to give me something that I want, even though it might hurt someone else. Okay. And these, I couldn't put enough space in this slide to show you all of the correlations between these four big things and bottom line to organizations. And again, those two, they fall into two sets, innovation and inclusion, which live and breathe in phenomenal consciousness. Oh, there it is. I came across the slide eventually anyway. So conscious rigidity activates different parts of the brain, the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the parietal lobe. And those are parts of the brain that are fired, they're active all the time, and they lead to some very maladaptive behaviors in organizations that center around our ego and our expertise. So these are just some examples. First I want to do is check in with you two things. One, time, because we did start a little late and I always talk too much. And the second is, do you have any questions? So first, time. How are we doing, Angela?
Well, we're right at 7, and we did start a little late. So if you're okay and anybody else is okay with going to 7:15, then we can have the whole planned program. That would be cool.
And I won't, my ego won't be hurt if you leave either. So if you want to go, that's okay.
If someone needs to leave, that's fine. We are recording this session.
Excellent. All right, questions. Like, what comes up for you when you're looking at this stuff? Is it a little different, right? It's not the talent development you're probably used to. What does this bring up for you? Questions or comments? Maybe you have a suggestion.
So the question that I'm wondering is, I guess I'm thinking about when you're hiring new employees, like, is there any way to know when you really are just meeting someone, if they're capable of
Mm.
thinking, or is it kind of a crapshoot?
If I were to say it was that easy, I would be a big liar. I mean, like, honestly, but what I can tell you though, is there are practices. So for instance, let's say somebody comes in. This is one of my favorite areas on the inclusion tip. Somebody comes in, they've got a great resume. You got two people coming in with great resumes. One is an African-American male, and one is a white female. And when you're sitting with them, you're already there's like attachment and assumptions going on. You're thinking, what's he getting at? This the busy mind. When you're hiring and you're doing interviews, the same things are happening. And the ability this is actually called an applied mindfulness practice of stopping. So remember, the definition of mindfulness practice is paying attention on purpose, non-judgmentally, right? In the present moment. So if you notice that you're judging somebody because of their gender or the color of their skin or the way they're dressed, noticing that and then letting it go and not judging yourself for the judging. Because when you judge yourself for the judging, then you don't like being mindful because all kinds of weird stuff comes up and you go, oh, I don't like that I was thinking that with that person. That didn't feel good. Maybe I don't like. So don't judge the judging. There is something really important. If you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell, what's the name of that book? It's a great book. It's a book about intuition. Intuition plays a role when you're hiring somebody. It plays an absolute role when you hire somebody. So you got to balance it, right? They might look good on paper, but there might be something that just doesn't feel right. Like maybe they're smiling through their teeth, or maybe there's right. And the goal is to really be able to see where this is rooted. And it's very difficult to do this type of stuff. It can get you in trouble. And the general rule with Malcolm Gladwell's work and his research is that the longer you've interviewed people, the more you can trust your intuition. If you're brand new to it, and you have a new employee and you're onboarding them, Your intuition might tell you something, and it might be based off of a bias or some movie you watched, who knows? But the more you do it, and the more you see the outcomes of what your intuition is telling you, the more the mind learns. I don't know if this helps, and it's certainly not like the best solution in the world, but I think it's a great question. I love that question.
I'm big on my gut. I've learned to pay attention to the gut because it is your sixth sense.
You know what's scary? Mother's intuition.
Totally. That's where I really learned
Don't mess with mother's intuition. I don't know how they do it. So yeah, I mean, that trust your gut. Now that gets a little easier when you get older. When you're younger, right? But you're also a little bit more receptive to things when you're younger. I've done some studies on that. It's very interesting how that changes over time. Yeah, I won't. Oh, okay. So we're rounding the corner here. So how do you develop conscious agility, right? So one way is to practice mindfulness. Not all organizations love the sound of that. They're 60% are using it in their training and development now. However, there are other ways to do this. Now I'm like, when you talk about brand, I'm the mindfulness person, organization development through mindfulness. But when I'm saying mindfulness, I'm really talking about conscious agility, that ability to shift out and have sadness, not be sad, to receive ideas, not to chase ideas, right? So that's really what we're looking at. And one of the things that I did was I said, okay, what we need is, this is new ground. Okay, this is new ground, and it's not new philosophically or theoretically. This stuff has been around for 2,600 years, and there are great authors and people who are doing this stuff, like Otto Scharmer at the Presencing Institute up at MIT, and John Kabat-Zinn. There's a bunch of different people who are kind of doing this work, but it's not mainstream. And understanding and experimenting with tools to make this happen it's not really happening. So what I decided to do is I decided to write an article on it, which is going to come out in August. And it gets into all the neuroscience that I couldn't put all the citations up here and all the fancy, okay, believe me, it's not just I'm saying these generalizations. This is grounded in neuroscience. So there's an article coming out, check that out. But I started to think, what about the systems that we create around us? What if we were to dismantle the systems we create around us that reward ego and expertise? So I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? Just like I want you to practice mindfulness right now, okay? Info you regularly consume. Think about information you consume all the time, every day, like habitually. Does it feed your ego and your expertise, or does it trigger humility and curiosity? Does it get you, if you're into mindfulness, right? Do you every once in a while surf the web and look up something that has nothing to do with mindfulness? Maybe even the complete opposite, to stretch you a little bit. So that's important. You might be the top of your field in a certain area, but have you ever listened to an astrophysicist talk about dark matter? So that's one question. The people who support you, do they typecast you, feeding your ego, right? Or do they see you more as a field of potential? So are you that person to your group of people? Do they joke about your personality? You're that person. Or do they see you as more of a person on a growth trajectory that could go in any direction? People who annoy you, do you see them as a nuisance, or perhaps your greatest spiritual teacher? Are they there? Are they put there to teach you something about yourself that is really deep and different, right? About the way that you react to their being annoying, so-called annoying, and the way you plan your day. How many of your meetings have too much on the agenda? Really? Look at your calendar after you get off this call. Look at your calendar and ask yourself, right? Do I have a little too much going on? And this is my favorite one. I end on this one. Your ability to let go. How much did that bother you? Is it killing you? This is my favorite slide. This drives people crazy. How can he have a spelling mistake? And he's a professor at Penn State. How? Oh, they're absent-minded professors. Oh, they're getting judgy. That's what we do. That's what we do. So we have attachments, right? For me, the reason I made this slide is because my mother was a grammar teacher in school, and she was constantly correcting my language. So I thought that was fun.
I'm right there with you. Same with
You're
my
kidding?
mom.
Oh my God, I have a soulmate over here. This is amazing. How
Grammar
funny.
Queen because of it. Yeah.
Oh,
Drilled it in.
you're probably scarred if you're anything like me. Constantly second guessing yourself. Was that grammatically correct? Okay, so then the next question is, okay, there's how we can look at developing and challenging the way people look at systems and structures at work, right? There's quick ways to help people get over themselves, right? And to see the limits of their expertise. If you're in a doctoral program, Angela knows about this, the more you learn, the less you feel like you know anything, right? And it's sort of scary, but it's also kind of wonderful. It's also kind of wonderful. So also at the individual level, how can you teach people how to do this? So I'm going to leave you with this because we only have a minute or so left. And it is this, that I decided, I finally said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just go out there. I'm going to make something up. I'm going to make up a thing that people can start experimenting with, because I've come across all these really cool things. And I came up with this thing called open source OD. And I put a little thing, if you want to scan it, that it will tell you how to get there, but it's opensourceod.com. It's free, 100%. It is member driven. I have nothing to do with it. My name, I had to put my name on there because all the people, the researchers were getting emails, but I put it at the very bottom of the page. So I'm trying to be, this is truly member driven, and it's a space for developing learning solutions that get people out of that thinking space. And the big thing that I work with, one of the big things is innovation labs. And innovation labs is basically like a technique that pushes people out of that thinking space through 21 different psychological elements that you can weave into training and development or organization development interventions, so that if you've ever done brainstorming, for instance, right? Get in a room, you get a flip chart. All right, we're going to brainstorm, and you try to go from 0 to 60. You're in that thinking space, right? So how do we shift you out? So check this out. You can go in and you can find different techniques for shifting people out, and you can develop specific ways and methods of teaching people, and you can post them, and we share them, and it's open. So check that out. And big thank you. This is the end of my presentation. I know this went over. I know it was hard to get here with the link situation, but I'm so happy that you came. And if there are any questions or thoughts, I'm happy to entertain them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brendel, for hanging out with us today. Anyone have any questions or comments?
No questions from me. I just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed your talk today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for
And
being here.
I will totally be checking out the Source OD for sure. That sounds
Awesome.
really cool.
Thank you.